Hey, it's John Reed, and man, I've got a usual suspect with me at SuccessConnect. What's up?
Great to be here, buddy.
The infamous Jarret Pazahanick.
Thanks for having me.
The demon of the tweet stream.
I have tried to have a active social presence this week.
The dreaded pesky question guy.
You haven't had as many of those. I'm hearing a lot of things I like. So
They've been ticking off a few of your bones of contention from the past.
it's definitely true.
So that's something.
We can definitely talk about that as well.
Yeah, but I'm sure we can come up with a few. So anyway, we are basically about halfway through the second day. We've had both the keynotes. We had a Mike Etling keynote yesterday. We had a more product-focused keynote today. So I'm just going to throw it out to you for some general reactions.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of the keynote yesterday. I do commend the SAP team for trying something different. I mean, I'm a big fan of trying something different. It didn't work for me. I happened to talk to several people. I didn't hear very many positive things from that, just as far as the format. One thing I like that you mentioned, which I think is a fabulous idea. So Mike Etling or your team, if you happen to listen to this, what John mentioned was, how about doing a similar format to what you had this year, but having a customer interview you.
Exactly.
And I really like the angle that is. I'm a big fan of having customers engaged in the proceedings. And I have to say, today, before I even had a chance to say, where are the customers, which is sort of my classic tweet that I have sort of ready to go.
Already lined up.
The initial thing, they brought 3 customers up on stage with a very interactive event that I thought was pretty neat in the fact that they each got to present an idea. And the winner, chosen by the audience, got their idea, will have their idea developed by SuccessFactors. So I thought that was a neat little wrinkle.
It was a recruitment related thing, right?
Yeah, I believe the recruitment won.
Yeah. So yeah, I think they had a strong comeback from yesterday where, trying to think of a nice way to put this because I don't want to slam someone too hard. A so-called celebrity personality from inside of SAP moderated the keynote, and I think it was a very poor fit. But having said that, it's not really fair to limit the assessment of a conference to, how well a particular keynote went. So what's your feeling about this event overall? Do they accomplish what they set out to? What things stuck out for you?
I mean, I think it was and we talk about the keynotes, it's important for everyone that wasn't here to know that there was also keynotes in the evening. And I thought those were excellent. Bill McDermott, I believe this is the first time that he's gotten up and spoken at an HR conference.
Which, by the way, is one of Jarrett's stumping points. One of your tweets, you're going to have to cancel scheduling that in the future.
Yeah, I have been pretty adamant about the SAP leadership team being at these events, and the vendors in the marketplace that are their competitors are doing that. But the nice thing is, Bill talked about some of the things I think we've heard him talk about before, but a lot of people in that audience probably never heard those stories. I thought that it really connected. I liked the back and forth with Mike and Bill. So overall, I thought that that went very well. And then, and to hear something that was very interesting, because we talk about, having an executive there shows how committed SAP is to HR. But they mentioned 2 times that I found very interesting was that more money of the R&D budget is spent on HR than any other domain area of SAP, which I found very fascinating. I'd never heard that before. And then to top it off, to have Magic Johnson come, I'm a huge sports fan.
Right.
I had heard a lot of his stories, but I hadn't heard them all. He was very captivating with the audience. I mean, he had the audience in the palm of his hand the second he walked out on stage, which was pretty phenomenal. So I really enjoyed that as well.
It was a tour de force of engaged public speaking, engaging the audience. I will say that. I think it was you that mentioned afterwards it would have been nice to hear from a couple of his failures along the way. He once had a terrible talk show, for example. But anyhow, he did a nice job. There were a ton of announcements, but I don't think any of them were really earth-shaking, but there were a lot of things to keep track of. For example, a shift to sort of continuous performance management from like a yearly cycle. Not all of these things are available today, but now there's a new app store. We could pick on that a little bit. Eliminating bias through machine learning, themes about diversity in hiring diverse workforces, Slack integration, which raised questions to me about Jam, actually. I'm sure I'm pissing some people off just by saying that. And one interesting thing on the App Store was ServiceNow as a partner for App Store integration. Very interesting.
Yeah, I did find. I mean, I've heard Mike say before that that some of our competitors are also our friend. So I think it's I saw Craig Power post frenemies, which are your friend and your enemies. But up until recently, and I believe it's true that ServiceNow is a competitor of SAP. But then to hear Thomas Otter talk about, back 4 or 5 years ago with different technology stacks in order to get these partnerships in place, real partnerships, and we've all seen the announcements where they're marketing partnerships, but some of these, when you're building apps and stuff, these are legitimate. They have to be legitimate partnerships if you're planning on, selling those apps. And he just talked about how it was easier than ever to expose the technology and have vendors be able to build these apps. And so I think I like the idea of apps. I've liked it for a long time. I believe there's lots of use cases for HR and apps. I just question the same thing that SAP has struggled with. We now have another app store. I mean, there might be 5 or 6 app stores out there.
Right.
How do they market them all? How do they get people out there? And it's a thing, if people don't know where to go, they're not going to buy them. And if they don't buy them, vendors are going to realize there's not enough money here to develop them. So it doesn't seem like it's an important thing, but I think it's a vicious circle. And I don't understand why one person at SAP can't say, this is our app strategy. We're going to have, you click on this link on the tab and you go to the HR and you go to this. I mean, it doesn't seem like rocket science to me.
Well, one thing that I will admit really ticked me off was that a while ago, I had a discussion with some folks at SAP about the proliferation of app stores, and they have got rid of a couple of them. But I pointed out that SAPstore.com and store.sap.com are still 2 different stores, and they said that was going away. The old store is still up there. What the hell is going on? And so you think about the SuccessFactors AppConnect, wouldn't it have looked a lot better as a subset of the digital store, where it could have been an HR component of that store? And sort of pushing towards a more seamless experience for customers, all apps in one place.
For sure. And there was a SuccessFactors app on that store, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, to me, the other big thing about it was, I don't know how long ago this decision was made, and was it rushed just to announce it here?
Yeah.
But you go to a website, and on it's a picture of 100 vendors, and you click on that, and there's nothing behind that. Well, 20 or 30 of these vendors have working apps. So how difficult would it have been to have where you click on the company's logo for the app to show up? So it just shows me that it's still a ways away. I'm hoping that SAP revisits the strategy about how they're going to market this, where they're going to put it. I mean, I don't know if that's all set in stone right now, but I just think that's an area that I hope they don't make the same mistakes they've made over and over and over.
Speaking of which, one of your past stomping grounds is around the mobile experience with the SuccessFactors, and there were some mobile announcements today that stem from the Apple Apple SAP partnership, basically. What is your current feeling about the mobile experience?
Yeah, I haven't really dived too deep into that. I mean, we all heard the announcements at Sapphire. Now it looks like there's a mandate, and it's a smart mandate. I mean, to have SuccessFactors, and SuccessFactors already did work on iOS and Android devices. So to me, like, I saw some new things today. It did look, from what we saw, was pretty neat. I don't know if that's just demoware at this point or that's actual offerings. I can't remember if they said they're coming or not. But either way, I mean, it's a smart strategy in HR with millennials to have more processes on devices, and I didn't get the impression that they were forgetting about Android. It sounded like they were going to. I think it's easier to develop on iOS to start with, and then tackle Android. And Holger made a good point, because I'm an Apple person, so I sort of think this one way. But he was just saying, like, in Europe, it's an Android market. So, and SAP plays big in that market. So to me, they're going to have to offer their offerings on both platforms.
So if you're a SuccessFactors customer, and I know you spend a lot of time on customer sites, what for you are the concerns that you still have going forward? Or is it things like support? Is it skills aspects? Is it consulting value to implementation cost? Is it functionality? Where are your concerns?
Yeah, one area that's not is functionality. I mean, the functionality has come very fast over the last several years. Functionality is coming a lot faster than most companies can consume it. And it's one of the reasons that there was a pretty big announcement here. It really didn't get a lot of airtime, but going forward, SuccessFactors is going to have 2 main releases a year and 2 what they call minor releases a year. So for customers, I had a chance to talk to Adam, who's not sure his exact role, but he's very high up in the whole data center infrastructure team and SAP leads that team. And he was telling me that if I get this right, the plan is for the Q4 and the Q1 will be more technical updates behind the scenes. There'll still be some things that customers can opt in on. The middle releases of the year, the 2 in the middle of the year, will be where SAP will bring out a lot of their enhancements and new pieces of functionality that will cause customers to have to regression test. On the surface, it makes perfect sense. You don't want to do any disrupting the business in Q4, Q1. Customers are more able to, take on more changes, and so I like that approach. And I think that's customers can only take so much change, and so the technology is coming so fast. So, not from a functionality standpoint, I think there's still pain points around support. I haven't heard anything about customer satisfaction. I mean, I think those do tie together. I would like to see SAP a little more proactive on tracking customer satisfaction, as well as the customer support. There's a lot of initiatives around customer support. So I was at an analyst event in April, and I heard a lot of good things. One thing that I'd never realized was SuccessFactors had outsourced all their IT support, all their customer support. They recently brought that back in-house, and they hired 300 or 400 people. And so, Mike Ettling he realizes that service is a strong point of SaaS, and they're doing some things that are that I think are very good there. But I don't know I don't know how long it'll be before customers start to see the impact of all the initiatives that are going on.
Mm-hmm. On Twitter, you're notorious for pushing my buttons and getting me to react strongly to something. So I'm going to turn the tables on you here and see if I can do the same regarding an announcement that came out from ASUG this week. ASUG did have a presence at this show. I see your look on your face already. I wish we had video for this one, viewers. ASUG's Partner Place, which is the much anticipated ratings community. Well, I don't think it's just that, but it's focused around ratings for consulting firms. It's not HR specific, but it does tie into a key point that you hammered on a lot around consulting quality and implementation quality. So what are your thoughts on all that?
Conceptually, I love the idea. I mean, I love the idea. I'm a big Amazon user, and when I go and I see something that's got 2 stars on it, I really take a step back and say, is that something I want to buy? In some areas, I'll only select things that are 4 stars. Here's the issue I have with the partner portal is as I don't, there's 2 issues with it. One of them is nothing that ASOG can do anything about. It's a lot of SAP customers are risk averse. I've had customers that have had great SAP implementations, but the legal department didn't want them to speak at ASOG event. And how this ties together is, do you think those organizations are going to let one of their team members put a negative review about the consulting firm? And keep in mind, a lot of consulting firms are chosen at the CHRO level, the CIO level. So the fact of, I don't believe there'll be anything but very positive reviews. And if everything's a 5-star, then it becomes a tool that's not very useful. And I also believe that if bigger SIs do happen to get low ratings, there's a whole mechanism behind the scenes where they will look to fight that and get that reviewed. So at the end of the day, I don't believe it's going to do its intended purpose. Where and I don't know if there's going to be enough use cases. So if there's not going to be 500 customers out there rating all the SIs out there.
So your concern would be not enough volume of reviews, and then the reviewers themselves might not feel as free to leave like an honest review as they might feel like on Amazon. It's not like they would necessarily be misleading, but they wouldn't maybe feel as comfortable with a negative review because they're on the line for that. And
I don't think many people would give a negative review because it's just not, these are big dollar projects, and giving a negative review carries a lot of consequences. But At the end of the day, Glassdoor was able to do it, but Glassdoor had it was a little more of an open infrastructure that I think they're going to have with ASOG.
Well, one thing I will say is I do think eventually there will be transparent ratings of large enterprise vendors, consultancies, and software. I do think there will be. Right now, it's a little more mid-markety, like the rating stuff that exists. Like you can go and get a lot of ratings of Microsoft products and things like that. I think that will happen. Whether ASUG can pull that off, I don't know. I'm not going to, cast judgment on the day of the launch, but the reason I brought it up is I think it does tie into a broader issue that you are sort of personal about. I think partially because you're an expert in success factors and you worked alongside a lot of bigger consultancies that don't necessarily feel the whole team of deep experts on every project. That's not really how they roll. So from a customer perspective, how do you recommend HCM customers and SuccessFactors customers, how should they think about skills and consultants, given that it's so hard to get that Amazon-like rating at their fingertips?
I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be educated. The interesting thing is I saw that study that SAP put out, and I think I sent it to you or we talked about it, but it was that 70%, and the number seems very high to me, but 70% of decisions made on software, and I assume some portion of consulting firms, are done before they even engage the consulting firm. Personally, I think that number is lower, but at the end of the day, that's a good number to have, and customers really have to understand that you just don't go and have 2 demos and decide what software you're going to do, and then you pick whatever consulting firm that they recommend. Your education has to start early on. The challenge is there's so many resources out there. ASOG, unbelievable resource to have a lot of information. Start getting educated. Talk to fellow customers. There's videos out there. A lot of the things you're going to do, you're not the first. So get as educated as you can, because when you're educated and you sit down across the table, it's going to help you determine what software is right for us. It's going to help you determine what consulting firm is right for us. And the biggest thing is, even if you get a brand name consulting firm, understand that the success of that project is going to be the consultants that they put on your project. And so make sure that just because it's a brand name consulting firm, go out and if you Google SAP failures, you'll see a lot of big failures and big SIs there. You also see a lot of very successful projects out there. But make sure that you're not just bringing on a team of 20 consultants, and then one left. Let's just, whoever you want to bring on, interview every consultant that comes on your project. And people say, well, how can I interview them because I don't know the technology? I'd say, you can still have a conversation with them. You can still ask business questions. They should be able to understand business questions if they're going to translate your requirements into technology. But look at LinkedIn. Do a search on them. See if their resume matches up.
Sure.
Hey, see if you have someone that you know. Like, I love when customers come out and reach out to me and say, hey, Jarret, I see you're connected to so-and-so.
Right.
Now, in my case, sometimes I don't know everyone that I'm connected to because I'll accept all the connections. But I bet I'll know someone that knows that person. And those are the things that I think help set you down the right road.
Yeah, absolutely. The other fun topic that you're fairly notorious for is the old SuccessFactors Workday comparisons. You keep a fairly close eye on what Workday is up to. And one interesting thing that I think ties in here is that it was clear to me from this conference, and to some extent from Sapphire, but definitely here, that SAP is thinking a lot about the finance HR combination. In fact, one of the SuccessFactors folks today referred to a threat. They're clearly talking about Workday in terms of the finance HR combo play. And so it's pretty clear that's heavily on their minds in terms of the S4 finance and SuccessFactors combo. But of course, the challenge there then becomes the S4 public cloud has to be up to speed, because there's no way you can really take on Workday with an on-premise finance and cloud HR component. It has to all be in the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different angles we could go with that. But I guess one thing that surprised me is the fact that the public cloud adoption is very low right now. So that tells me that SAP is starting its journey in that direction. And I mean, let's be clear. They were behind in HR in cloud technology they did the various things they needed to do to get caught up. That's why the R&D money is there. That's why they've brought in. I mean, they've brought in a lot of very strong leadership, people from Gartner and people that were really well respected throughout the industry. People like Thomas Otter and Yvette and Keith Strodman and some of those folks are on Mike Ettling's team, and Mike Ettling as well. So I think I always recommend customers is do a dog and pony show. Have them come in. Have them look at your requirements. Do a live demo and really dig under the covers. Don't just assume that all these solutions are global. One thing I have to say about SAP technology is SAP does understand global technology. So everyone can put up a sign and say we're global, but SAP really does understand the global requirements, and it is built into a lot of their software, and that's a big deal.
Well, and that was interesting because one of the analysts gave Mike Ettling, president, a hard time around IBM's use of Workday in the U.S., and Mike was quick to point out that IBM is using SuccessFactors talent and goals. Is it talent? No, I think it's performance and goals on a global basis. So to his point, right, global requirements.
And it's fascinating too, because I hadn't realized that the big professional service firms are all making a rapid move to the cloud. Now it makes sense because they're shifting their consulting practices to the cloud. So it makes sense for them to be deploying internally. But from what I heard, Accenture is doing a big SuccessFactors implementation, and who knows if that's why the SuccessFactors CIO got to be on the stage. We know IBM is going with Workday.
You mean Accenture?
Accenture, sorry.
Sorry, yeah. I'm sure that's just a total coincidence, Jarret.
Yes.
I'm sure of that.
And someone I saw a tweet, I don't know if it's true or not, but that Capgemini and EY are going to SuccessFactors. And so it was just very interesting that each of them is putting up a flag. But keep in mind, all those places we just mentioned do have a Workday practice and do have a SAP and SuccessFactors practice.
Well, and you make a point too, because in the punditry we get obsessed with like Workday versus SuccessFactors versus Oracle and the skirmishes and who has the better functionality. But from a customer perspective, it's really more about talking to your peers about what works and what doesn't, bringing in different vendors and approaches and picking the one that's right for you, which may have a whole bunch of different criteria that have nothing to do with, what's on the short list, right? That you and I might think about. So,
well, one thing I did want to talk about it's something that I feel pretty passionate about, and I really love the direction SuccessFactors is going, and it's about the diversity and the bias initiatives that they have, and they started to announce them pre-SuccessFactors, and I had a chance to talk to some of the workforce analytics guys last night, and they've had some of this availability inside of the software. But what they're looking to do is they're looking to every product decision that they make, they're starting to look at it first from a diversity, what type of bias, diversity and bias. And to me, I've been blessed with both a son and a daughter, and the thought that if they both work equally hard, my daughter will not get the same opportunity as my son.
Right.
It's fairly offensive to me, to be honest. And so that's an initiative that I think everyone can get behind. And I can tell that's something that you can tell when people have a deep passion about something. And I could see several times in talking and hearing Thomas Otter talk that this is something that he really believes in. And the neat thing about it is, like, we saw some demos today that it was very interesting, because things like a job requisition, I had just never assumed that job requisitions there was bias in job recs, and there really is. And they were showing today just a basic spell checker that can help customers, and it's really what they talk about is unconscious bias. So we all know there's real bias out there. No software in the world's going to solve that problem, but I do believe there's people out there that really don't realize that they're unconsciously being biased. Or we saw a 9-box today. The 9-box, for you don't know, that's the various boxes on the talent profile where you click a button and it just shows male and female, which is just I think for some companies they're going to be shocked because, oh yeah, we're very diverse and this and that. And then you start to go up the levels of the organization and you realize maybe we're not quite as, I think it'll be an eye opener for some companies. Some companies won't want to go there, but I really like the direction that SuccessFactors is going in this area. And I haven't heard a lot of their competitors talk specifically about this area as well.
Well, I have a lot of problems with SAP at the moment, but I have to say that the diversity initiatives are compelling. And I think it's starting in this conference, you got a sense of kind of an overarching framework for it. Like where it was not only a priority for the right reasons, but it was being translated into machine learning. It was being translated into discussions about bias and diversity as a competitive advantage, not just as not just something to do because it's the right thing, but something to do to make you a stronger company. I mean, the video SAP showed
Incredible.
was that it had autistic workers. It had a guy who had been homeless for a while speaking open. It had openly gay workers, and the way they were doing it, it was just so. I almost like teared up a little bit because I was like, that is the kind of workplace that I'd be proud to work in, and that's also a better workplace in terms of sourcing talent. And that was one of Mike Ettling's big points, was that the talent shortage is a myth. And I love that he said that, because I mean, there are certainly areas where talent is scarce, but this notion that we're always short of talent is like, no, we're just not tapping into the right communities, and we don't have the right imperative to do that. And so I think if they do this right, they can combine software with sort of a value system and also a business case. And then that's pretty compelling.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to get behind something that's doing good, and it makes sense, and it's it's a win-win all the way around. And on that video, I mean, I hope that video gets more play. I hope they show that video at Sapphire next year. I mean, I just think that's one that should go to a broader audience. It's feel good, but same thing. It was very moving for me to watch that as well. So
if you're listening, if you do a search for SAP Business Without Bias on YouTube, I'll bet you'll be able to find it. Or try Google as well if you can't find it there. The only counterpoint to that I would raise is that I do think that SAP has a good kind of problem, which is the growth of success factors, the customer accounts. Ettling's thinking 2,000 by the end of the year, whether they make it or not. That's Employee Central. That does raise skills shortage issues. And my experience has been in the past that partners mostly respond to that through the most sort of generic ways of getting a bunch of people certified. And we've discussed this before. We don't need to have a long discussion about certification today. But to me, part of what SAP is going to have to do there is to help partners figure out how to source more diverse talent also, as opposed to just throwing a bunch of people into the academy, which are usually junior consultants. And we had an interaction on Twitter about this because Vijay was talking about how he's found, he works at IBM, Vijay Sankar, how he's found that empty nesters have made some great consultant leaders for him because they have all this deep background and now they can travel again because they're kids. So it's an
fascinating
untapped demographic, right? That is not considered, appropriate versus but for him, it's like they have way more experience and depth of knowledge than like a college graduate might. And so to me, that's going to be very interesting, is to see how SAP copes with a very specific skills shortage around the growth that they're having.
And I hadn't really thought of the empty nester is very interesting, but I also think the same concept of, women that are highly educated, they're in the workforce and they decide to stay home and raise their kids, and they decide to go back into the workplace. I mean, they're they're smarter than when they left, that's for sure. And I mean, and a lot of people will take the fact that they were outside of the workplace for 10 years as a negative, and I would question maybe that's not, I don't know, but I just think it's the thought of is so many companies do the cookie cutter job requisition and the cookie cutter hire and the same questions. And I just think that there's other options out there. And I hope that companies start to sort of change the way that they're looking on staffing. Well,
and to your point, there's like with the SaaS consulting that we've talked about before, you can envision a work at home mom or dad. Like if a company was open to it, where they would essentially work 3/4 time or 2/3 time most of the time, raise their kids at home, they would travel some, but then they would also be able to service clients remotely in a way that wasn't considered acceptable in the past. But it creates you need a certain imagination and willingness to challenge your own cultural barriers to utilize that talent. The talent's there. They could be extremely talented, but they made a family commitment that they have to honor, So to me, that's a lot more exciting than the old days of like when I was a recruiter, where one of my first questions was, can you travel Monday through Friday? And if you couldn't do that, then I put your resume in another pile, no matter how good you were.
You may have to put that old picture that you had with the long hair somewhere.
I might have to post that.
No, but one thing I did like about the conference, and I have noticed the last three or four events I've been to, is that everyone is rowing in the same direction. And I think that's something that starts at the top of the organization. And you might say, well, that's the way it always is. And that's not the way it always was. In the SAP, at least the HR world. And so I do think that the nice thing is they've consolidated several areas under Mike Ettling. They have some clear strategic directions. The messaging is very authentic. We haven't heard any grand promises or anything. I mean, they are a good examples last year. They talked about intelligence services. It was, I don't know if it was vaporware at that time, but it was very early. Maybe it had I can't remember the numbers of what it had, but a year later, they came back and they also mentioned intelligence services, and they talked about 420 customers had executed, 17 million transactions on it. And it's pretty phenomenal too, because one of the neat things about the cloud-based technologies is the vendors can anonymously track so much information because it's in their data center. So not like they're looking at your information, but they can anonymously cross, and they can determine who's logging in. Like they came up with this preview environment last year where companies can go in and they can preview a release before it comes 30 days earlier. So a really neat offering. They can actually go in and see which customers are logging in, how much usage are they getting out of that. So it's just, there's some opportunities there that everyone being in a multi-tenant cloud environment is going to benefit everyone that's in the multi-tenant cloud environment.
Right. In fact, I heard some praise of multi-tenancy from one of the presentations that was not something you typically hear in a HANA show. So, but anyway,
have to give a shout out to Naomi Bloom, who has been a multi-tenant
somewhere Naomi Bloom is smiling
for when I didn't even know what multi-tenant was. So.
She did make a video appearance at the show too, so there you go.
Yes, and that was a new award that's coming out, which I'll want to hear more details about that, and I'm sure we'll see it at the next event.
Well, there you have it, folks. I tried to put the chip back on Jarret's shoulder, but we got, I don't want to say happy camper Jarret Pazahanick, but happier camper. Seems like you like the direction, which isn't a bad thing.
No, I mean, I like I said, the rowing in the same. My biggest problems over the years was maybe over-promising, under-delivering, maybe a little lack of transparency at times. I'll just give you a small little example. Is for years I used to ask, how many enhancements in SAP HCM are coming from customers? And I didn't get the answer. So I got very public in saying, SAP is not developing for customers, and now it became a huge, big deal. Maybe that's why I have I had a troublemaker moniker for a little while. Today, very freely, they say Thomas Otter stood up and said 70% of our enhancements are coming from customers. And it doesn't matter if it's 70, 60, 50. It's the fact is they are working with customers. They know a rough number. That number, by the way, should never be 100% because customers, the vendor is armed with a lot of information where the 30, 40% is moving the technology in places maybe that you wouldn't even think to go. But the fact is they are actively working with customers. But that's a perfect example of a bit of the changing of the SAP culture. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, and it's nice for executives too, because they don't have to be get that weird look on their face when you raise your hand now, because they realize it might not be such a terrible question.
Right.
So win on all sides, right?
Exactly.
Well, and that was one of the key themes of the conference actually was leadership and trust, and how is it you win trust? And I would argue
how to win.
I would argue, well,
winners
never quit, right? But I would argue that the key to winning trust is transparency and follow through. So there you go.
Right, and I think when customers make the move to the cloud, no technology vendor has everything that they need. So
Right.
There is a bit of, we want to go with people that we can trust. And we know, hey, we're not going to have everything we had. Oh, but we are going to have 20 other things we didn't have. So net, we're moving in the positive direction. But they want to know that when vendors are making promises, that they're going to keep that. And two things that jump, I've seen the R&D, I've seen the functionality that's come out of all the R&D investment. But I didn't see any signs of anything letting up in that area.
Right.
SAP knows that HR is strategic. And it was funny because we talked a very tiny bit about the linkage with finance, but they realized that if they lose the HR business to certain vendors, there's a strong possibility they're going to lose the finance business. And so to me, they're rallying around HR being a real competitive area. And from what I hear, they're doing very, very well in Europe and Asia Pac. competing head to head with some of the other customers. And in the U.S., they've gotten a lot more savvy on how to deal with some of their stronger competitors. So it's a good place to be right now if you're a buyer of HR technology, because there's some strong options out there for you to consider.
Well, I wish we had time to get into continuous performance management because I have some real questions. Although I do think it's progress to do continuous performance management over the once-a-year review, I still think the paradigm is pretty deeply flawed. But unfortunately, Jarret, you want to go see a keynote that's about to start, and I have an article that I'm behind on. So I think we might have to save that for another time.
Well, thanks for having me. And
thanks for the roundup.
Thanks, buddy.